Tātou. When a chief arrives, a korowai is put on him, so give me your jacket. I'm told it's XXXXL. I'm not one of these skinny politicians like Mr. Goldsmith. In Kaitaia, we're always, hey, fix that up. We're suspicious of skinny people, especially skinny cooks. Yep. Of course, nothing else will be remembered about this speech that Shane Jones could not fit the jacket around his puku. Becca, thank you very much for hosting us. This kaupapa originated when I was invited by Dave, the chairman of the company, and his colleagues to come and talk about what it was we were proposing to do in terms of an infrastructure announcement, given that the Infrastructure Board, previously chaired by the former CEO of Air New Zealand, had put pressure on the Prime Minister and the government. And then obviously had an inkling that we would be doing something early in this year. And I have to acknowledge Becca for making the place available, and for Dr. Bollard and your members for working with us to create this event. So look, I want to acknowledge, as I said in our Māori language, our visitors from afar. There's a host of people here from different boards. Obviously it's a chance for us to hear, meet, greet the members of your Infrastructure Commission. I understand that we've got people from the Consula's Office of Australian Government. Greetings. We've got a visitor here from the Infrastructure Victoria and Infrastructure Western Australia, and all of you who are civic leaders who are here, the mayors, and I understand Mr. Forbes, the former mayor of Opotiki, is also with us. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So when we created the Infrastructure Commission, and I have to acknowledge my colleagues from the National Party, this was something that enjoyed considerable support across the House. There was, however, a concern that we don't spend too long setting it up, and we want to actually see it working within the industry, within the investors, and creating traction and momentum. And there's no single answer as to the long-term plan in terms of what works for New Zealand, but everyone in this room who's ever spoken to me from an infrastructure perspective has complained bitterly that there has not been a 10, 20, 30-year investment pipeline to give the confidence of those of you who are bringing international investment, those of you who have domestic investment, those of you who are training a workforce, and who want to be able to compete with our cousins on the other side of the Tasman. So when the Commission was created, that's a key part of its writ. There was a debate as to how many compulsory powers it should have. So they are very limited. Obviously, it has the ability to draw information from local and regional government, because you know as well as I do, D-Day is approaching us at the level of local and regional government with water resilience. And I rather suspect, based on what I've seen recently in Taitokerau, when we allocated, quite frankly, as an emergency gesture, a couple of $1 million to cope with the crisis in the far north, throughout New Zealand, we have sat on our nono, we have sat on our chuffs, and either allowed it inertia or political fear or whatever reasons to cause us not to grapple with the genuine costs and the huge challenge that's going to grow in respect of water resilience. So for those reasons, I'm sure you agree with me, it's incredibly important that our Commission corrals as many as possible of our subnational levels of government and our entities that, quite frankly, are struggling to deliver quality services. I know, because I come from Awanui Kaitaia and we have that difficulty. Look, I'm not going to talk too much about the ports of Auckland or light rail. The latter you can talk to Phil Twyford about. The ports of Auckland, we've done our report. There is an additional bit of mahi being undertaken by the Ministry of Transport, which will then be shared with the Infrastructure Commission. but I'm looking forward for our Commission to create an independent perspective in terms of information that politicians or the orthodox bureaucracy may not be focused on. I actually want to now focus on regional announcements. I know that our day is going to be broad. I know that there are panels. I know that there are people from the media here. And it's important that those of you who do have the opportunity to engage with the media, you don't need to agree with me. Just when you put your name against me, then expect return fire. But you don't need to agree with me. So when the media is here, please put your whakaaro, put your ideas forward, because I've learnt as your infrastructure minister, in many respects a figurative role, because the infrastructure minister is not in charge of the budget, although I have had the good fortune of being a very independent, fair-minded steward of the Provincial Growth Fund. I now want to turn our attention to the announcement that was made by the Treasurer and Mr. Robertson and the Prime Minister of the $12-odd billion recently in terms of capital upgrade. An extraordinarily large infusion, but it doesn't answer the deeper question, which I hope some of you begin to grapple with. We have the ability in Kāinga Ora being some part of the housing empire, to go and borrow in the debt markets. We do not have that ability as I stand here with NZTA. And I think for those of you who are more experienced professionally than I, NZTA operates on its 4.5 billion pūtea per year, likely to change as the transport fleet changes. So the deep point, I think, for those of you who are long-term thinkers and strategists is what changes ought we to be driving? And I say to you, industry, it may very well have to come from you, what changes ought to be driven in terms of how NZTA is funded, ought it to have powers akin to Kāinga Ora, i.e. the ability to raise debt and then to really fuel a 30, 40, 50-year pipeline. That is an issue that several governments have shied away from, but I say to you, if you're really keen to see transformational change, then I look forward to hearing about ideas in that regard. So $190 million worth of projects we're investing in today, and I want to start with the Marquee project. The Marquee project, in association with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and I want to acknowledge the members of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council here today, is the allocation of the $80 million as well as the $20 million from that council, a sum total of $100 million to begin building a wharf facility, a small port facility in Opotiki. Now this is something that was initiated under the former mayor, and it goes right back to the days of my personal experience of Helen Clark and Michael Cullen. Obviously, Sir Michael Cullen didn't want to touch it. He left politics, started working with the Maoris, and now he wants to spend money like it's going out of fashion. I haven't spoken to him for a while since we killed off the capital gains tax, one of the few redeeming things I've done as a politician. That $80 million is going to drive the deep sea mussel investment, which is why we have the Whakatohea tribal leadership here with their investors, people who have put their own money into a sunrise industry, given the changes of not only lifestyle, but the unwillingness of lots of coastal communities now to tolerate aquaculture close to land. I personally am quite puzzled by this. However, the RMA, until it's dealt to in a robust fashion, continues to operate as an obstacle for growing those kinds of industries. So the tribe and with the investors have gone right out to sea. This is an endowment for a part of New Zealand that has been neglected. It's a part of New Zealand that's not in the mainstream of our discussions, but for the people who either own resources around Opotiki or want to see other parts of New Zealand grow and industries over time follow. I am announcing here today, not in Opotiki. I will be going to Opotiki, though, to the chief of the tribe, and I'm told there is a large detonator there, which I will be invited to plunge down blow up half a side of hill, create a new quarry, and I look forward to daylighting and exploding my way into the future. Some might say, unfortunately, I'm already doing that, but that's another matter. So, hōmai te pati for that. And I want to acknowledge Rosie Mercer, who is on the Provincial Growth Fund Committee. The Prime Minister said in setting up committees, she said, look, Shane, you're 60, I'm about 20 years younger than you. Can you please go out of your way to attract the next generation of young women leaders, either professionally qualified in engineering or relevant qualifications? So when this particular project, I'm sure my colleague from the other side of the House knows, it was topping $235, $260 million. So it was never, ever going to fly. The single person who has driven on behalf of the government in an independent way the shrinkage of those costs has been Rosie from our independent advisorial panel. So thank you very much. Look, there's other projects. There's $25 million down on the South Island. That's to defang those apprehensions that all of this happens in the north. The needs of the South Island, the needs of the West Coast, although it has a limited population, are extraordinary. There are also projects in the Taranaki area, the Forgotten Highway, a term that is quite evocative, which I don't plan on experiencing later this year, the term forgotten. The projects also in the Hawke's Bay, yet again roading projects, and as luck would have it, in the Taitokerau, 2 additional roundabouts. Now to you NZTA people in the room, I hope one day to be in charge of you. Every week I've had Paul Goldsmith make fun of me in Parliament that the first announcement that was made by the Provincial Growth Fund was a roundabout in Waipapa, 700 metres from my house. Exactly. So you NZTA people, I am suffering as a consequence of the venom coming from Epsom. Get off your nono, get the picks and shovels. If I see Ken Rintoul today, our member from the NZTA board, I expect to see that roundabout up and about, because I'm also around announcing here today 2 more roundabouts, one at Puketona, which will take you to Waitangi, and at Kawakawa, which is a very important part of our highway north. And the final announcement, look, I'd like to make is that it's got 3 themes: ports, rail, and roads. And our ports in the west coast of New Zealand, which is now growing into a mighty fishing capital, and who knows what other natural resource developments will take place in the future. We are future-proofing those ports. So to wrap it up, this is a day for you to meet our Infrastructure Commission, give them a sense of direction, if you feel necessary, a sense of urgency, a date also where we announce, and I have announced the majority of them, of our regional projects. Although they're not in Auckland, you've got a fair lick of the cherry, you Aucklanders, and start to get your mathematics right. The original cost was $2 billion for the railway loop. It's 80% up to $4.5 billion, which of course makes me very, very cautious about whatever might happen with light rail. Thank you very much. Kia ora tātou.